are upon us already and will only worsen. For once and for all, Mr. President, it is time for us to wake up.
Would the senator yield for colloquy?
Please.
Through the chair.
The senator from California.
First, I just want to say how proud I am to listen to your words, to have you on committee that I'm so honored to chair, and to learn today that you've made, is it over 56 presentations on the floor of this great United States Senate, regardless of the hour, regardless of your other pressing needs. And you are making the record that we must act to prevent the worst and most catastrophic occurrences from the climate change. Now, I wanted to ask you a few questions because we have gone through a lot of these battles in the committee, and I think it's time that that people knew what happened. So I'm going to see if we can put something in the record here. You pointed out putting a price on carbon is the way we need to move. You pointed out that many Republicans outside of the United States Senate support it. Could you tell me a few of these, because you've mentioned them before, some of the leaders in the Republican Party?
Well, one of the most prominent one is George Shultz, who served with great distinction under, I want to say, 3 Republican presidents.
It's true.
And I happened to run into him within the last 10 days. And I said, thank you for your work on carbon. It's important. He said, it's important. He said, we have to do a carbon fee. He said, revenue neutral. I said, yes, we have to do a revenue neutral carbon fee. Revenue neutral carbon fee means that the money that's generated by the polluters paying for the harm that they do to all the rest of us, which they otherwise get away with for free, goes right back to the American people. It is revenue neutral. It doesn't go into the government and raise the size of government. It goes right back. You could do it by lowering taxes. You could do it by paying off every student loan in the country. You could do it by giving seniors a raise on Social Security. What a good discussion that would be to be having right here. But we can't have that discussion because the other party is trapped by the polluters, trapped in their politics, trapped by their money.
Right. And the point I'm making is, you point out one very prominent Republican. There are many, many more. I remember when I started out in politics, I was a county supervisor. The environment was the one issue, or two. The other one was a woman's right to choose. Those 2 issues were so bipartisan that we all came together. When we ran for county supervisor, you didn't have a label. You ran just as an independent person. But everyone backed that constitutionally protected right to choose, and everyone backed cleaning up the environment. So, Senator, you have, to describe what has happened here, used some very colorful language from time to time. But I thought one of the things you recently said, I want to make sure that I quote it right, is that it's like this Capitol is surrounded by the lies of the polluters. And you can't get the truth into this chamber. Is that an accurate way? You say it actually better. Maybe
they have erected a barricade of lies, Madam Chairman. They have erected a barricade of lies, and it is supported by an avalanche of money.
Right.
And if you go outside that barricade, you see enormous support for getting something done about climate. You see, just to give the example of our corporate community, Coke and Pepsi, the Mars Corporation, which makes M&Ms and Mars bars, Ford and GM, Apple, Nike, Walmart, on and on you go through the signal American corporations, the heraldry of the American corporate world. They're ready to get something done. But there's enough money that gets thrown by the polluters and enough threats made by them in Republican primaries that our colleagues are trapped. And unless we build a coalition that gets them a way out, that barricade will continue to inhibit progress on this issue here in this building.
Right, and the dilemma that we face is the window to act is closing in on us. You showed some extraordinary photos. One is up there now. We see that already climate change is creating climate refugees. There was a movie done that was called Climate Refugees, and it went out to the island nations of the world that many people, Mr. President, never even knew existed. And the folks there, because of the sea level change and the change in the weather and the fact that they can't grow the crops they used to and they can't rely on water, et cetera, they have to be leaving their homes that they've lived in for generations. And what you're saying today, it's so sad and shocking. It looks to me like you're having that in your own state.
Your point, Madam Chairman, that this used to be a bipartisan issue is actually illustrated by this photograph. This is Roy Carpenter's beach. It's the beach that got probably hit the hardest. There were some bigger, older houses got washed away down the shore, but this has a lot of these small houses that families have held on to for generations. And after Sandy, with the sea level rise and the storm together, knocked them into the water this way. This individual right here is Lincoln Chafee. That's Governor Chafee. He served in this body as a Republican, and he was one of the staunchest environmentalists in this body. And if you go back further, his father, John Chafee, served as the chairman of the Environment Public Works Committee. He was one of your predecessors, and he helped lead the passage of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, a Republican. And he was proud of it. He didn't hide from it. It wasn't something the Republican Party had to run away from in those days. Try to find that in the modern Republican Party. Well, it's embarrassing what's happened to a great political party.
Well, Senator Whitehouse, you raised the name of John Chafee and Lincoln Chafee. I was friendly with both of those Chafees. John being my chairman, a role model for me. I literally learned from him. And not only was he a leader on the environment, he was just a leader on so many other issues. Sensible gun laws. Sensible gun laws. And something has happened to the Grand Old Party. Somebody once said, well, maybe they're the formerly Grand Old Party, but I have hope that they will return and be the Grand Old Party, because I was here when we had leadership on the other side for a climate bill. We fell just a few votes short. If we didn't have a filibuster, we would have nailed it. But putting the price on carbon is the only way to go. And you make the case because there is a cost. And what is the cost? You see it. This is the cost. And yet, those that are putting this dangerous pollution in the air don't pay anything for it. As a matter of fact, they get subsidies still. You and I sometimes talk, offline here, and we say that we're very calm when we speak here because we know we have to have a sense of decorum. But inside, a lot of us are churning because we love our children and we love our grandchildren and we love this nation and we want to be leaders and we want our nation to lead, and yet we are having a terrible time. We have a situation where 97% of scientists say climate change is happening, and we know exactly why. It's human behavior. Our friend Angus King did a remarkable presentation to the caucus the other day, making the point that Senator Whitehouse made, which is that this isn't conjecture, this is science, this is measurement. You measure it, you see it, you know what is happening. This isn't like something when you're hit with a tragedy and you don't want to look at it. You lose somebody and you're in denial about it. We understand that, how the human mind would do that. But this is science, and it's very, very difficult. I wanted to just ask a couple more questions, and I'm really enjoying this colloquy, and it reminds me of the old days when this used to happen more in the Senate. My friend mentioned the President's Climate Action Plan, and he talked a little bit about it yesterday, and he said some very good and important things about it. But I want to know if my friend is aware that there has already been filed by the minority leader here, the Republican leader, a CRA, that's the Congressional Review Act, to overturn a rule that would in fact put in place some very important pollution controls on new power plants. And does my friend A know that he has filed this, and does my friend also know that the rule isn't even finalized and the Republican leader has filed it, and what does he make of that?
It is, if the underlying problem weren't so serious, it would be laughable that a rule that has not even been promulgated yet, they're already challenging. They're sort of pre-challenging it. And it just shows what a pell-mell tumble our Republican colleagues will subject themselves to in order to keep in the good graces of the polluting industries. Again, it's embarrassing. It ought to be embarrassing, but I think there's hope. One of the signs of hope is the polling information among young Republican voters. Young Republican voters under the age of 35, you don't have to be very young, young Republican voters under the age of 35, when asked about climate denial and asked what their view is of people who espouse climate denial, say that they think that they are ignorant, out of touch, or crazy. That's the young cohort of the Republican Party. That's what it believes. So time, obviously, is on the side of reason and science and the plain evidence that people see in front of their noses across this country, whether they're farmers or fishermen, whether they're hikers or skiers. Anybody who has contact with the outdoors understands that this is absolutely real. It's only people in this little hothouse of polluter-paid intrigue that the denial strategy still stands up. And it's our job to knock it back down.
Absolutely. I think the other point you made is tying this all to Citizens United and the fact that these polluters, they are only focused on this. They don't want competition. Let's be clear. These multinationals, they don't want competition. And the fact of the matter is they see solar on the horizon, wind, geothermal, clean energy. They even see natural gas, which has, if it's done right, has half of the carbon pollution. And they are holding on through this ride in this century. And, you know, they won't work with us. It's so, you know, it's more than sad. But I will say this in closing my remarks tonight. We have a new energy, if you will, in this body. We have more than 20% of this United States Senate that has formed together in our action task force that Senator Whitehouse and I are heading up. We are going to take action. We are going to be heard. And we are going to wake up the Congress, which is what has to happen. And I want to say to my friend how much it means to me, someone who felt pretty much isolated here on these issues for a while, how important it is that even though you said, and I quote you were sick of coming down and speaking, I hope you won't get sick of it. I hope you won't get tired of it. And I will predict to you, because you know I'm right, that a lot of us are going to be joining you pretty soon. And not only will your voice be heard, but many other voices will be heard. And that will echo around this nation. I'll tell you the thing. There's so many issues we have to deal with. Lord knows we so agree with the President on strengthening the middle class. We so agree that we need to confront the challenges of deficits and jobs and education. all the things, the health care, which, by the way, for my state is going gangbusters, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, just signing up thousands of people a day. It's moving the country forward. But all these issues we have to deal with. But we have to save the planet. We have to save the planet. And, you know, I wonder, I do have another question, my friend. You know, some of our colleagues say, oh, you see this freezing cold and all the snow, and this proves there's no climate change. There's no global warming. It's freezing. And, you know, of course, the scientists that I talked to are telling me that they predicted extreme weather. That's what they predicted. You look at what happened in poor Atlanta today, where there's a school bus that's been sitting out on the road, I think somebody said from 4 yesterday to 8 this morning. And these people stuck because of unexpected icy snowfall. And here's the thing. It's called a vortex. And the reason it happens, as it's explained to me by the scientists, and one of them just came on the floor now, is that the jet stream has changed so much because of the warming in the Arctic that instead of holding up that cold air in the Arctic, the cold air is turning around and coming back down. And we haven't seen that in a while. So you can't just say, it's cold today, there's no climate change. If there's extreme weather, and we have it in California, we have a drought that we've never, ever, ever seen. I went through the one in the 70s, I remember that, where you used the water in the tub to flush the toilets and you tried to recycle the water from your dishwasher and washing machine. We've got a worse situation. It was predicted. And I want to ask my friend, because you've done so much reading, isn't it true that this extreme weather was predicted in the UN reports and in many other reports?
Absolutely, and indeed, years ago, one expert in this area wrote that in terms of the experience that people would have, yes, the planet is warming, but the experience that people would have wouldn't be just of warming, it would be of weirding weather, weird weather. And that truly the better name wouldn't be global warming, but would be global weirding. And that's because, very simply, when you add energy, heat energy in this case, to a closed system by trapping it with more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you speed things up. You make storms stronger, you change weather patterns, and you see things that you haven't seen before. And so the things people are seeing now, not specifically, not that storm, but the pattern that people would see more extreme weather of various kinds was indeed predicted, and the fact that it's happening is exactly consistent with what the scientists have been warning us.
It is, because it was years ago when I took the panel. I think it was 7 years ago that I took the gavel. I don't even remember. Time goes so fast when you're having fun. And I had that gavel, and the first thing we did, we had a hearing on climate. And by the way, I would urge my colleague, you should see, we put together a green book of all my colleagues' statements. How many Republicans were with us then? Olympia Snowe had a great piece in there. John McCain had a great piece in there. Judd Gregg had a great, John Warner had a great piece in there, and others. And it made me so proud. And at that hearing, we had all these experts talk about the fact that over time temperatures would go up, but in between all that, as you say, it's not a matter of the weather that day, it's the pattern over time. What happens over time, you have these extremes, but over time the warmth kicks in. And we see it happening. The American people are smart, and they get it. And we're just not going to let up. And as calm as we sound now, that belies what we feel inside and the obligation that we feel to act. And so I guess this is as good a time as any to tell the American people they'll see more of us, and more colleagues will work on this. I want to thank Senator Reid because Senator Reid has elevated this issue in our caucus, and He's devoting more time to this issue. He cares about this. He's a wonderful family man with a lot of grandchildren, and he wants to give them what so many of us have had, the beauty of this country, the livability of this country, and there'll be more of this to follow. So with that, I would ask my colleague if he wants to close and yield back to him.
I thank the chairman for her staunch leadership. She is such an ally and leader for us. It really is very exciting. And yes, you will see considerable more activity. You know, I'll close by telling one personal story, because very often you're dealing with statistics and you're dealing with figures and you're dealing with things that are happening on kind of a large scale when you talk about climate change. But I remember this day. I remember this day walking along and meeting with these homeowners whose houses these were. And I remember talking to the lady whose house, I think this one was right here, that the governor is looking into. And she remembers, as a child, being in that house. And in front of this house, she had a lawn that they could throw frisbees on and play wiffle ball on. And on the other side of the lawn was a road that gave access along the shoreline, a sand road. And on the other side of the road was a parking lot where people would come and bring their cars. And on the other side of the parking lot was a beach that was so long down to the water that she could remember running as a little kid. You know, when the summer sun beats down on the beach and the sand gets so hot that it hurts your feet, and you've got to dash to get your feet into the water because they're hot, hot, hot as you run as you're a little kid. And she would make that long run and think what a long run it was to get down that hot sand and into the cool, clear waters of Narragansett Bay. That beach is gone. That parking lot is gone. That road is gone. Her lawn is gone. And this is what has happened to her house. So if people want to know why we are not going to give up, yeah, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of having to come here and do this. It is tiresome to have no progress and people not listen and have it because of, frankly, scandalous polluter-paid interference and influence in this building. I'm sick of it. But I am not going to stop, not while this is happening to my home state of Rhode Island. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
from Morales.
May I ask unanimous consent that following leader remarks on Thursday, January 30th, the Senate resume consideration of S-1926 with the time until 11:15 a.m. equally divided between the two leaders or their designees, with the final 10 minutes equally divided between Senator Menendez or his designee and Senator Toomey or his designee, with Senator Toomey controlling the final 5 minutes, that at 11:15 a.m. the Senate proceed to votes in relation to the following amendments: Toomey number 2707 as modified, Coburn number 2697, Merkley number 2709 as modified, and Heller number 2700. Further, that upon disposition of the Heller amendment, the Senate recess until 2 p.m. At 2 p.m. when the Senate reconvenes, the Senate proceed to vote on passage of the bill as amended. Finally, there be 2 minutes of debate prior to each vote, equally divided in the usual form, and that all after the first votes be 10-minute votes.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Let me now ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
And further ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 282, S-1417.
Clerk will report.
Calendar number 282, S-1417, a bill to amend the Public Health Service Act to reauthorize programs under Part A of Title 11 of such act.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I further ask that the committee reported substitute be agreed to, the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of H.R. 2860, which was received from the House and is now at the desk.
The clerk will report.
H.R. 2860, an act to amend Title V, United States Code, and so forth, and for other purposes.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that the bill be read 3 times and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that the Rules Committee be discharged from further consideration of S.J. Res. 28 and S.J. Res. 29, and the Senate proceed to their consideration en bloc.
Is there objection? Without objection, the committee is discharged. And the measure will be considered en bloc.
I ask now unanimous consent that the joint resolutions be read a third time and passed en bloc, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Con Res. 31, which was submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 31, designating January 2014 as National Blood Donor Month.
Is there objection to proceeding the measure? Without objection.
Let me ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
And finally, let me ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 10 o'clock a.m. on Thursday, January 30, 2014, that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, and the time for the 2 leaders be reserved for their use later in the day. That following any leader remarks, the Senate resume consideration of S-1926, the flood insurance bill, under the previous order.
Without objection.
I am advised to inform my colleagues that there will be up to 4 roll call votes beginning at 11:15 a.m. tomorrow in order to complete action on the flood insurance bill. The vote on final passage of the bill will occur at approximately 2 o'clock p.m. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
The Senate today continued work on legislation to delay planned increases in flood insurance rates. Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma raised a point of order, saying that spending in the bill violated budget rules. But the Senate voted to waive those budget requirements. The Senate also approved 3 amendments to the flood insurance bill. The Senate session started